Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to speak today. I will be presenting the binding antibody responses to SARS-CoV-2 variants from Alpha to Omicron after BNT162b2 vaccination and booster in infection-naive and previously infected individuals. The Pfizer-BioNTech BNT162b2 mRNA vaccine was designed based on the spike protein of the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it has been administered to millions of people in the world. However, with the emergence of new COVID variants, there are rising concerns about the levels and durations of the vaccine protection against the variants. So here in this study, we wanted to understand the binding antibody responses after people acquired their immunity from either vaccination or natural infection or hybrid immunity, which means getting both of the infection and the vaccine. We have enrolled a total of 56 participants for this study, 29 individuals who never got infected with COVID, and 27 individuals who had a previous COVID infection. We collected their blood and isolated the plasma at 6 different time points: before the vaccination, 3 weeks after the first dose, 1 month, 5 months, and 8 months after the second dose, and also 2 weeks after they get their booster shot. We ran the plasma sample on a multiplex platform which is called mesoscale discovery, or MSD, to quantitatively measure the spike-specific IgG antibody against different variants, including the wild type, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and the Omicron. So MSD is an electrochemiluminescence assay. It comes with a 96 well plate with 10 open spots in each well. Each spot can be built with a different antigen. In this case, the antigens would be the spike protein of each variant. The antibodies in the sample will recognize and bind to the antigens, which will then be recognized by secondary antibodies. The secondary antibodies are conjugated with electrochemiluminescence labels, which will emit light and then be received by the machine and then be used for measurements and quantification. Here is our MSD data, which is showing the spike-specific IgG levels against wild-type Wuhan strain. All numbers are in arbitrary unit in log scale. The x-axis is the 6 time points, and the yellow dots are representing the naive individuals, while the orange dots are representing the previously infected individuals. You can see here that before vaccination, the median for the naive people is around 100, while the previously infected people is over 10,000. We have a cutoff at 1,000, which is what we consider positive. You can see that there's a small group of people in the previously infected group. They're still negative, and they behave very much like the naive at this point. After the first vaccine dose, both groups dramatically increased, with the previously infected ones being significantly higher than the naive ones. Then after the second dose, the previously infected people maintained their levels, while the naive people continued to increase, and they increased to a level that is still lower than the previously infected group. Then after 5 months and 8 months, the antibodies continuously decreased for both groups, and then you can see that the naive group decreased a lot more and a lot more rapidly than the previously infected. And then when people got their booster shot or the third dose, their antibody levels were increased back up. Now there's no difference between the two groups. And when you look at antibody levels for the other variant, I am only showing you the data for Delta here because Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, they are very similar. The entire trend is overall the same to what we are seeing for the wild type, with very minimal or no decrease in the antibody levels. However, when you look at the antibody levels against Omicron, now the overall shape for the trend is still very similar, but the antibody levels at all time points are significantly lower than all of the other variants, and they're almost 1 log lower. When you compare all the variants side by side now, you can clearly see that after the booster shot, the Omicron were the lowest compared to wild type and Delta, but there's no statistic differences between the naive and the previously infected. I also wanted to mention that I haven't shown the data here, but we did continue to follow a few participants 11 months after their second dose. Some of them were boosted and some of them were not. For those who received a booster, their antibody remained high after 11 months, with no difference between the two groups, while for those who did not receive a booster, their antibody levels just stayed low, and the previously infected people had higher levels than the naive people. In conclusion, the Pfizer mRNA vaccine induced lower binding antibody responses against Omicron compared to all of the previous variants. The antibody levels continue to decrease after the second dose, and the decrease is more rapid with the naive people. A booster dose can increase your binding antibody levels against all variants, including Omicron, and a booster dose can also normalize the differences between the naive and previously infected individuals. Therefore, we strongly recommend all individuals, regardless of your previous infection status, should receive at least 3 doses of the mRNA vaccine in order to maximize the levels and durations of binding antibodies. With that, I would like to say thank you to all of my colleagues for their support, and thanks to MSD for providing me with the assay kits, and thank you all for your attention.